Have you been treating your goals like a want or a need? Where does this fall in terms of your priorities? Listen, there are times where I'm very strict, very by the book, no room for deviations with my diet. And then there are other times where even in a fat loss phase, even when I hope to make progress and I want to make progress, I'm still a little bit more lax with what I'm willing to sacrifice, what I'm willing to cut out. I think it's completely okay to decide early on, and I think this should be something you decide and you're very clear on prior to the phase beginning, how much of a want this is versus how much of a need this is. Or even within the goal. It's like, hey, what needs to happen minimally for you to feel good about this phase, for you to feel like it's worth it? I'll tell you a story. I asked a client recently, she got on stage for the first time. We've been working together for about 2 years. She just listened to the podcast, by the way. Very, very excited to get on stage. And I broached this in her email a few weeks, maybe like 3-4 weeks before her show. I'm like, what would need to happen for you to be happy with the outcome on stage outside of placing? Like, what would you need to show up as? How would you need to feel day of show? What would need to happen afterwards for you to feel like this was a success? And I think this exercise is a really powerful tool because it does force you to really confront what is that bare minimum for you to feel satisfied. And I think this is something that we need to do, especially going into a growth phase. For a lot of us, myself included, this is something that is very foreign. It's a very difficult process and it can be very discouraging, especially because progress can feel very slow because, frankly, it is. It's a very slow process when you're doing it correctly. And especially for individuals who are doing it without assistance, this is going to be something that for the most part, you're questioning if anything is actually happening. Now, when we're talking about contest prep, it's very easy to get lost into because you're constantly like, I'll say this, it's very easy to get lost into wanting to win and placing too much value on the placing itself on stage. Oftentimes people forget that the judges are only able to judge what is there in front of them. If 15 girls show up and 12 of them are very, very lean and 3 of them are very full and they're still lean, like they're still conditioned, but they just have a denser, fuller look, not as streamlined. This could be something that they are then marked down for and placed further towards the back, depending on how their physiques stack up. This could also be something that maybe one of them places in the top 5. Maybe one of them even wins because it's just like she's got the package. And this is the intangible aspect of bodybuilding, specifically within the bikini division, is like they don't just want the most conditioned. They don't just want the most they don't just want the biggest glutes. They want the whole package. They want the presentation. They want the person that is making it look effortless, like they could do it in their sleep. Maureen is a great example of this. Like, no matter what, she looks like she's been doing this her entire life. Like, as soon as she hits the stage, the confidence is there. And that in itself is just one component. But when you look at that compared with the physique that's there, like 80%, that can absolutely take you ahead of physiques that technically are denser or more conditioned. Now, the other aspect to this is that contest prep is hard. And if you've never done it before, if this is your first time, it can be something that you very much feel like you deserve a higher placing just because you put forth more effort, or seemingly it appeared or it felt like your experience was that you put forth more effort or you made more sacrifices. And the reality is, you're not entitled to better placing because of effort. Everyone works hard. Everyone, I mean, there are people who freaking just like, they do it in their sleep and they just like get on stage and it's very easier. It's seemingly easier for them. But everyone at the end of the day does want to win. They have made sacrifices for it. And this is aside the fact in terms of how you were then placed. I think being able to contrast whether or not what your goal is, what your set out goal is, whether it's a want or a need, what is the minimum thing that needs to happen in order for you to feel satisfied with the sacrifices at play? And then also to consider what is the most that you're willing to sacrifice. I've heard insane stories from people just like turning their home life upside down, just completely going a different direction in terms of career paths during a prep, because they were very hopeful and frankly very naive about what it took to be a professional competitor, or what that even entailed, or what that would offer them long term as a career. And I know a lot of you out there, like you might be aspiring to be at the very tip top or even at minimally just be a pro in the sport. But I can tell you that having an identity and having values and having things that you can at least like draw a line in and be like, hey, I'm not going to do this. Like these things still matter outside of how I do in this show, or they still matter to me outside of how I end up placing. I think for me, this has been one of the biggest aspects, the most impactful aspects that's allowed me to continue to compete, and then be on stage, off stage for periods of time that, like, you know, some might even argue is too long, still returning with truly a passion, like a fire for the sport. And that is because I have things outside the sport that make me feel very valuable, make me feel very proud. And that's where I think if you are going to go all in, if you are going to treat your goal like, hey, I need to win this show, then you need to be very clear on what that's going to entail and what you're willing to sacrifice. And I think once you have that line in the sand, it can help you really free up some mental bandwidth, because then it's not a surprise when you're faced with needing to make that sacrifice, because frankly, you decided at the very beginning, this is a need, as opposed to someone who is like, I want to do this, I want to do well, but this is what I can commit at this point. I can't do any more than that.